All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host, Queon. I go by Q, of course. And on this episode of Mediocre Dads, as usual, I'm joined by a guest. Again, it feels good to finally say as usual now versus just say, hey, special guest on the show. It's still special guest, but still it feels better to have guests here and actually be able to talk to someone rather than me just talk to a screen. Because I could tell you at times it does get a little boring. I don't like, as weird as it sounds, I don't like talking to myself. Anyway, on this episode of Mediocre Dads, I'm joined by a guest. Her name is Megan, and we are going to talk about kids who are neurodivergent and parents who find out their kids are neurodivergent and kind of the some of the thought processes that go behind that. Because when you find that out, it can be, one, intimidating, and I imagine, and two, it can be a little bit like, oh, okay, if they have this, did they get it from me? And all these thoughts race into your mind, right? Because let's just be very frank, as parents, we don't want anything to be wrong with our kids. It's not to say that because they are, that means there's something wrong with them, but anything could mean it. For as parents, we're like, oh my gosh, is this like a small thing or is this a huge thing? It scares us. It's intimidating. So we just want our kids to be these perfect shells of human beings. We're like, please, 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 please keep it that way, if you know what I mean. But anyway, before we get too deep into that, I'm going to allow Megan here to introduce herself and kind of tell you a little bit about herself. So Megan, without further ado, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, so I'm Megan Bondi, and I started my entrepreneurship journey as a child and started a business in my basement doing like childcare and day camps for kids, and did like theater camps and dance camps and Halloween day camp with my best friend across the street. It was so fun. And then I became a speech language pathologist and worked in the public school system for a long time with kids who learn differently, specialized in autism and ADHD. And then I started to realize that the kids weren't necessarily struggling in school because something was wrong with them. It was because the school needed to change. The environment needed to be more inclusive. So I shifted to working more with teachers and school-wide and district-wide systems to just figure out how to make schoolwork better for all the kids. And then crazy thing happened. I had been working for years as the specialist and then realized just 2 years ago that I'm neurodivergent, that I think and learn differently. And so, yeah, it's kind of brought me back to entrepreneurship to be able to support other neurodivergent adults at this point.
That's awesome. So when you say neurodivergent, what exactly does that mean, right? So for some, I know they might be their first time or hearing that term, or they've heard it before, but they're like, I don't really understand what that means and whatever the case may be. So if you could, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so the idea of neurodiversity, I'll start with that, is that there's this natural variation of lots of different types of brains and how we think and process and behave, and that diversity is a good thing. Just like biodiversity, we have lots of different plants and animals, the ecosystem is thriving. Same with our communities, that it shifts away from like this medical thing, like, oh, something's wrong with you, you have this disorder, a deficit. And the idea is just, nope, there's everybody has different strengths and cognitive profiles, and that's a good thing. And then neurodivergent means you sort of fall outside of the typical or the norm of the culture. And the main reason that it's really important to just sort of acknowledge if someone is neurodivergent is because it acknowledges that they face discrimination. And so if people say something like, well, we're all kind of neurodivergent or we're all neurodiverse, well, yes, everybody is under this umbrella of neurodiversity, but neurodivergent people have a tougher time because just the systems aren't really designed for their brains that sort of fall outside the norm.
Got you. And so with this, is neurodivergent, do people who fall into the categories? So is it like ADHD or ADD, I guess, but ADD now is coupled together with ADHD? Is it more than that? What is into that, right? Does
Yeah,
that make
so
sense?
so it's an umbrella term for a ton of different identifications, and it can be anything that's in the DSM, which is the manual that like a psychologist would use to identify somebody. And
Gotcha.
there's over 500 different
Wow.
identifications in that manual. Some of the most common ones that people think of when they hear neurodivergent are autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, OCD, bipolar, PTSD, brain injury, anxiety, sensory integration disorder, gifted, twice exceptional. So there's a huge number of sort of profiles that you can get identified with that would fall under that umbrella of like you're you have this piece of you, this identity marker that is marginalized.
Got you. Okay. So for yourself then, you are in fact neurodivergent as well.
Yep.
Okay. And so was that something that you found out later on in life, or did you know it, have an idea of that as you were growing up?
So I found out when I was like 37 years old, and so that would be considered late identified. Um, and I really found out when my kids got identified at school, and I thought, I'm going to research this and, kind of figure out what this means. And I started to notice that a lot of the traits were similar to me.
Mhm.
And as I went to workshops and was learning more about it, they talked about that there's a genetic component to some of the neurodivergent identities. And so I just started to really embrace it and see it as a positive thing about myself that I bring diversity. And also it really helped me to acknowledge that some of the challenges that I faced are not because there's something wrong with me or I'm broken. It's that system wasn't inclusive for how I function.
Got you. And so if you don't mind, so what specifically was it that you were diagnosed with?
So both giftedness and auditory processing disorder. So it's
Uh,
called twice exceptional when you
okay.
have giftedness in addition to a disability.
Man, I am learning some new terms today. I'm very, very good. I've never heard of some of those things. Okay. So you said auto, can you say that one more time?
Auditory processing disorder.
Okay. Are you able to tell us what exactly that is?
Sure. So some of the characteristics are that you're highly sensitive to noises and you struggle to hear all of the information and background noise, especially, but your hearing is fine. So if you do a
Yeah.
hearing test, you'll be able to raise your hand when you hear all the beeps. But the testing that they do for this is really around how your brain is processing what you're hearing, and like the timing can be different between your ears of how the information gets processed. And so I got a filter that looks a little bit like a hearing aid, but it helps with the timing and it helps me to understand better the words in the background noise. And so without the filter, I was getting like 65% of the information, and with the filter I get like 95% of the information.
Gotcha. And so was there a struggle and when you were growing up in school and even going from adolescence to adulthood, was there a struggle with because you didn't know that?
So I just felt tired all of the time, but I did really well in school. School is easy for me. And so I compensated, and oftentimes that's common with twice exceptional people, is that you miss the disability because, oh, like I learned this quickly and I can do my work quickly, and it sort of covers it up. But over time, you realize, like, wait a minute, whenever I'm in really loud situations, I feel exhausted. I feel anxious when I'm going to noisy places. Is this just because I'm a parent who's working that I'm like really tired.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, there's something else that, once I started really paying attention to my needs and taking care of my health, I found some things that could help me and support me. And it doesn't make the tiredness of being a parent go away
Oh,
completely or
no,
anything,
no.
but
Yeah.
anything that will help, I'll take it.
Right? You're just like, hey, I need that extra boost. I'll get an energy drink at this point. Which energy drinks don't do anything for me. I'll be very frank. They don't do anything for me at all. I have ADHD, so um, I can have, it's crazy. I can have coffee. I can have an energy drink, and at like 7 o'clock at night, like right now it's like 7:45, so I can have coffee or an energy drink right now, and people were like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, man, I promise you, like, I'll drink that and within 20 minutes I will fall asleep. I just
Just
I don't, it has no effect on me. Caffeine means nothing. I have tried over consuming caffeine because I'm in the military, so I have had several nights where I've had to stay up for over 24 hours. So I've tried it all, and it doesn't work. I wish it did at those times. I definitely wish that, my body wasn't like rejecting these things, but it doesn't. So I definitely get that. And so you're a mother of, how many kids do you have?
two. I have a
Two.
10-year-old and an 8-year-old.
They boy girl, or boy girl girl?
So my 10-year-old daughter, and then I have an 8-year-old son.
Man, they are. I imagine they are a handful. But
They're active and they're fun and they're challenging and all the things of parenting. And part of being twice exceptional is having these different intensities that I
yeah,
did not know about till I got identified. And I'm like, okay, this explains a lot about having very emotional kids,
yeah.
very
Oh,
intense sensory things going on, intense imaginations, all the things.
parents, if you're listening, you know exactly what she means. She's saying the nice things about her kids because, truthfully, if we could say mean things, we would, but we keep that inside because we love our kids and they're great and they bring us nothing but joy. Can you see me smiling? Oh man, it's funny. When I'm at work, I will talk to some of the guys and gals that I work with, and some of them don't have, a good portion of them don't have kids, and so I'll talk to them kind of about my kids, and they'll be like, man, I couldn't imagine being a dad, or I couldn't imagine being a mom, because kids are a pain in the butt. And I'm like, yeah, but you've only had that experience from, like, most of them have only had the experience from other people's kids. I was like, and listen, I'm a parent, but I don't like other people's kids. You know what I'm saying?
So
Like
true.
I'm very adamant about this, and I tell people this all the time, and they look shocked when I say this. I'm like, what? I'll be very frank with you. I don't like other people's kids because I'm not raising those kids, so I don't know what's going on over in the house. I don't know what you accept, like your tolerance line. I don't know what, like, some kids, they'll be able to walk in, like, for example, people might bring their kids to work, and they'll just ask you 100 questions, and like, there's no such thing as 21 questions. No, it's 100 questions you're being asked, and after a while you'll be like, hey man, get your kid, I'm actually trying to do some work. And they're like, I deal with this at home, I'm glad it's somebody else's problem right now. I'm like, well, no one asked you to bring your kid here.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, like, kids are great, but, like, parents, answer your kids' questions. They're just going to bring on more, but answer your kids' questions. But anyway, I digress. And so for your kids then, let me ask, are you married?
I am. Yep.
Married. Okay. I think you did mention your husband. So he's with the kids right now. And so
Yep.
is your husband similar? Is he neurodivergent as well? Or is he considered, this is just my term, what I tell people. I call, like, for my wife, for example, I call her a normie. So because I have ADHD, I'm like, oh, you're a normie, you wouldn't get it. And so is your husband, for lack of better terms, not to be mean, is he a normie?
So I would not call him that.
No, of
And
course not.
the term that we often use is neurotypical.
Yes,
So
there we go. Look, we're using
in other
politically
words,
correct terms here, guys. I apologize. Listen, I'm in my household, I will call my wife a normie, and she'll be like, I don't even know what that means. I'll be like, well, it's you. You're the normal one in this house. The rest of us, we're on hyperdrive.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't gone to get evaluated like I did, but he
Mhm.
sort of self-identifies as like, yeah, I see these same traits in myself too.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's valid. Like, I don't think that it's important to have to go to a professional to have somebody else validate
100%.
that you have this experience. If you see those traits in yourself, to just kind of know that in your heart is just as valid in my mind. So,
Yeah, got you. Okay, so so then your kids, like you said, you found out the reason you got tested was because you found out from the school that your kids were neurodivergent
mhm.
themselves, and so kind of walk us through that experience. So what was that like when you found that out? Was it kind of like a okay, it is what it is feeling, or was it an emotional feeling of like, oh my goodness, what's going on? How could this happen? Type thing. Can you walk us through kind of your emotions and when you found out?
Yeah, like I was definitely both excited and scared at the same time
Hmm.
because the very first identification they got was gifted. And
Hmm.
you think that that's going to be like awesome because they are like scoring really high on certain tests that they're taking. But then I had also heard about the social emotional pieces that go
Hmm.
with that. And I got really nervous because that's way more important to me than grades or a certain college or anything like
Right.
that. And I just feel like it's more important to be able to just thrive as a human being in life, to be able to navigate socially and emotionally. And so, yeah, I was scared. And it was also like, I've been doing this for my career for years and I didn't know. Like, I felt a
Yeah.
little just kind of surprised or um, just like, how did I not notice or
Hmm.
know this about myself and my kids when I've literally been studying this as my job as a speech
Yeah.
language pathologist for years?
And and so kind of with that uh keeping with that track then is when do you think it had something to do with the fact that maybe you didn't want to acknowledge it? And this is not me trying to call you out. I'm just more this is more of curiosity than anything. But it was it do you think that maybe you didn't want to acknowledge it and you maybe saw some of the traits, or was it you just genuinely didn't know, or why do you think that is? Because I say ask that question because I'll give you an example. My daughter, my oldest, she displays a lot of the traits that I do when I was growing up, and for me, I'm like, okay, boom, I know what that is, and I told my wife this, and she's like, no, I nope, don't want to acknowledge it. And it's not she doesn't want to acknowledge it. We haven't. It's not like we've gotten my daughter formally tested, if you will, but she doesn't. She ultimately does believe it. It's just our kids. The kids are being kids, and they're different. They're hyperactive. They're finding themselves, and a lot of it could be that, and a lot of it could be me just trying to put her in that mold, if you will. And so that is why I asked that question. So is it? Do you think it was It was a mixture of both, or was it just you just genuinely didn't?
I genuinely did not know. And because it's genetic and my family, my parents and my
Oh wow. Okay.
relatives have similar traits. Now, like, as I talk more about it with my friends, I've sort of been just connected with other like minded people throughout
Hmm.
my life that it was my normal.
Yeah.
And now, like, their kids are getting identified and they're realizing it about themselves. But I didn't know it about myself. And uh, because I didn't have any major like issues growing up, I
Yeah.
was able to like do fine in school. And really, it got to a point where I burnt out because I just wasn't acknowledging that I had different needs
Yeah.
and thought that anything that I wasn't doing well, it must be that I'm not working hard enough or
Yeah.
something like that. But yeah, I mean, I still see a lot of traits of ADHD in myself too, but I got tested for it and they said that I didn't meet the criteria. And I still wonder because it's less likely to get identified in both adults and in women.
Hmm.
that I might be ADHD as well, because a lot of my relatives also are ADHD. So
And that's one of those things where, because I know with well, I say I know, but based off of the evaluation which I went through, they it's basically this list of things. I think I forgot the number of things, and basically they're like, hey, if you have like 5 or 7, I think it is. I don't remember the number exactly. Let's just I'm just gonna guesstimate here, but say it's a list of 21. If you have 5 or 7 of them, then you are considered to have ADHD, whatever the case might be. And it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, cool. We have a way of metrics, if you will, to define that. But then how do you, within each of those categories, how do you for certain say based off of this, you 100% have that, you meet this criteria, and then you add them all up. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It's a weird evaluation system. It's not to say it's foolproof. I'm no doctor. I'm no psychiatrist by any means. Just one of the things I was always curious about when they were telling me this, and I was like, I mean, like, I guess I could be, but yes, it was one of those things. And so
true.
I definitely can relate to that. So when I was growing up, and I was in school, I always thought, like, okay, I have a hard time focusing. I couldn't sit still to save my life, and I would just be like, okay, I just have to work harder than everybody else does. And I had an idea of what ADD and ADHD was, because in the early 90s, or I said late 90s, actually, and early 2000s, that is when they actually separated ADD, or they combined, I'm sorry, ADD and ADHD together under the umbrella of just ADHD. But my mom would say it all the time. It's like, oh, you have ADD, don't even worry about it. But she would tell me all the time. And I never knew, actually understood what that was or what it meant to have ADD. But then as I got older and I saw the kids in high school who were more or less separate from the other kids in the that were, it was kind of like they were given an opportunity to kind of reset. They would have a 15 to 20 minute period where they wouldn't be in class at the beginning, because I think it was just kind of an opportunity for them just to kind of reset, get focused, and come back into class rather than be on full motion disturb or whatever the case might be. And so I was like, well, I never want to be in that group, because if I'm in that group, I'm seen as a different way, or the case might be,
Mhm.
as young people, we fear being judged by our
Yep.
peers, and not fitting in. And so I was like, I just have to work harder than everybody else, but it wasn't working. And so, being my brain wasn't fully developed, I decided, well, I'm just going to be a class clown, and I'm going to barely skate by, and just be like, this is what people expect of me, and I'll be good to go. And that's what I did. That's what I did. I barely, I tell people all the time, I should have been expelled from high school. I was acting out, and I was not overall a good student. And so then, when I graduated, I walked, and whatever the case might be, I told myself, I was like, well, I'm too stupid to go to college. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to join the military. And that's what I did. Now,
Mhm.
I tell everybody this. I tell that story because it's important to me. It's a big part of my life. And I didn't get actually diagnosed with ADHD until about 2 years ago. And I was like, it was relieved. It was a sense of relief to finally be like, okay, I understand. I'm understanding myself more and more and better. And so, was that what it was? It like for you? And do you think that's what it was like maybe for your kids?
It was such a relief for me, because there's like this debate about labeling that I see a lot online. And like, I worked in special education in the schools for a long time. And um, I'm like, I needed the label. I
Yeah,
needed the language to be able to like find the information and find my tribe and be able to realize that there's nothing wrong with me. It's just different. Different does not mean less or bad.
yeah,
And I think the biggest thing that we need to do is just change the perception of the label. Like, the having language or vocabulary to describe different people is not a bad thing. We just need to see it as, this means I have these tendencies and these strengths. Like,
yeah,
so often with ADHD or autism or whatever it is, the sensory sensitivities, like with my auditory processing disorder, we focus on what's quote unquote wrong or the problem. And
Yeah,
we forget to talk about the creativity that people have, the hyper focus that you can have when you're really motivated by something,
it's
because
a
you're not
superpower.
always distracted. You like people don't realize that ADHD actually includes hyper focus when you're really into something. You just need to like care about it and want to do it. And there's just so many positive things about being neurodivergent, you know, thinking just outside the box, coming up with new ideas and problem solving, deeply empathetic and care a lot about other people and just the compassion and you know, oftentimes love music or art or different theater experiences, sports. I mean, just the leadership qualities. There's so many strengths that we need to be focusing on.
It's amazing that you said, because as you're saying those things, I was like, I relate to all of those things. It's,
Yes.
and it's crazy because so many people, like you said, we would like to hyperfixate on, and I'm gonna use that term there for a reason, but we like to hyperfixate on the negative side of that label. And I think, as you mentioned, labels are important, right? And words are important because when we have that label, we're able to research and be able to so we can understand what it is that label actually means versus just saying you have this label, now live with it. And it's like, okay, but I need to know, I want to understand what that is, what it means, all these things that, because it's crazy that so many researchers, they do these studies on so many different things. There's so many studies that have been done, right? Whether they're good studies, bad studies, whatever the case might be. I won't get into that aspect of it, but there's so many studies and so much research that could be done on our own as individuals, that when you start looking into it, you start to understand, oh, wow, okay, I can do this. And there's there's these tips and these tricks. And with ADHD specifically, my experience, I've doing research. One of the first things I did when I got diagnosed was I watched a podcast on Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he was talking about ADHD, and he was talking about medication and not taking medication. He's a very knowledgeable dude. He's really nerdy. He's a neurologist, I think he is. And so like he really geeks out. So like keeping up with a lot of what he was saying was very difficult at times because I was like,
Mhm.
man, I don't know what you're talking about here. You know, you're using some crazy vocabulary here, but overall, just getting the general gist of what he was talking about, it felt good to listen to. Oh, okay, I understand now. I get it. And everybody's different, even within, if you're having, and you say you take medication, everyone's the dosage, right? It's different for everyone. It's
Right.
not just a prescribe all, like, hey, you're going to be good with 10 milligrams, a slow release 10 milligrams a day, but this person could be good with 50 slow release milligrams a day. You know what I mean? It's just everyone's different in that aspect of it. So but for me, I really honed into the leadership side, because the military requires me, especially now where I am specifically now, requires me to be a leader. And so I found my where for me it's like, I think this is seems easy or simple or logical, if you will, and when for other people they're like they're not necessarily struggling more than I am, but they seem to get defeated a lot sooner, or a lot quicker than say someone like myself. And it excites me, right? So you mentioned like the ability to focus on something, especially when you're into it, man.
Mhm.
I cannot tell you. Usually because like, it's, ADHD brain. If I'm like, I'm really into something and I'll get into it, and after a while I'll be like, that was kind of cool, but I'm good. I don't want to I don't really care about doing it anymore. And that was one of my concerns about starting a podcast. And I've been doing it for over a year and almost a year and a half now. And I'm like, I'm super excited every time I get on and get to talk to people, because I love talking to
Awesome.
people. And
Yep.
so I was like, man, I was really nervous, because I was like, hey, I put some investment into this, and I was nervous I was going to lose interest in it, but I haven't. And it's just one of those things that's like, I focus on it because it interests me. I want to get better. I want to improve, and whatever the case might be. And I haven't even scratched the surface of being good. So it's a great thing, right? I don't want to spend this whole time talking about myself, I promise, but just being able to vocalize my experiences with someone else, to kind of give that perspective to other people. So for you and with your family, how has it been since that diagnosis, for yourself and for your kids, right? Like you mentioned, there was excitement treatment, of course. But then there was some concern, obviously. But now I imagine it's been a few years since that actual diagnosis. So how has your family been navigating that? What are some of the things you guys been doing to make sure everyone's good and you're not being able to recognize like, oh, hey, I might be, I need to tone it down here, or whatever the case might be.
I mean, I think one of the changes is we're learning to just self advocate and communicate our needs to each other and be able to celebrate each other's strengths. And just as I become more self compassionate, I'm more compassionate to the people around me of like, oh, they just see things differently. And before it was more like, you are a burden and getting in my way because you're doing something differently, husband.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, wait a minute, I'm the one who's out there celebrating neurodiversity. This is good that we're different. Um, just because we may have some similar profiles in how we're neurodivergent, we still have a lot of differences.
Yeah.
And so to be able to like work together and communicate our different needs. I will say that I also have perfectionistic tendencies, always have. I can see the vision of what's possible. I'm a big picture thinker.
Mhm.
And so I want to like get there. And that is hard because I spent years and years of my career learning about like all the different interventions and supports and different things and doing all the evaluations and like choosing what I'm going to sign my kids up for to give them supports. Like that takes so much time on top of already just trying to adult and parent, like filling out all the forms and like bringing them to an appointment. So like we don't do a lot of the recommendations that the clinicians put at the end of the report of like sign your kids up for occupational therapy and speech therapy and
Yeah.
mental health things and whatever. It's like, no, we just need time to like be as a family, and we'll do a little bit of that stuff here and there based on what they need. But it takes a ton of time to research and navigate all of those different supports.
Yeah. And so with I big advocate for family, right? Obviously, the title of Mediocre Dads, but with the big advocate for I am a big advocate for family, and so when these doctors and clinicians say these things, it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, that's great. I get that your professional opinion, if you will, and it's not to discredit your professional opinion. However, I do think there's an aspect that where sometimes we just need to stop over analyzing every single aspect of what that label is, if you will, and then just say, hey, okay, I got it. Sometimes we just need to let's just hang out with our kids. Let's just be with our kids. Let's just be parents. And that means hanging out with our kids, interacting with our kids, showing our kids love and affection, right? And it's not to say these things are going to make go away, but it is to say like, hey, you don't need this complete deep dive intervention all the time to help a kid develop rather than just say, okay, hey, your kid has this thing. So now that means he needs this medication or she needs this medication. Be prepared. You're going to have to go to this appointment and need to do this. And it's like, okay, hold on. I understand. And some other families might need that. And I'm not saying don't do it if your family needs that. I will say is I think that's for some family, for a good portion of, just try some good old fashioned, hey, let's just be a family. What does that look like? Let's remove so many of these distractions, so many of these things around us, right? Let's less screen time. I'm not telling your parents not to tell your kids to have screen time. Let's just be honest. We're in that generation where that day and age where kids are going to have screens in front of them. And it's, let's just on us to figure out that navigate that aspect, right? So maybe less screen time, more outside time, get some sun and running around with our kids, showing our kids we can have fun outside. Because I remember growing up, I spent 90% of my childhood, whether I was forced to or not. Mom, if you're watching, you know exactly what yes, I drank from a hose. I was not allowed because inside was clean and I was dirty outside. And, if I'm coming inside, that means I'm done outside. And I didn't come inside till the street light on. And so, I I know times have changed. So, but getting out there with our kids and having just real genuine family time with them, I think also helps that healing aspect of it for them to develop and grow and understand themselves and understand their and so I mean I'm really interested more. So for you, and you said you have a business. Is your business, is this what it's focused on? Is it focused on helping neurodivergent families and kids?
I focus on other neurodivergent entrepreneurs,
Okay.
actually. We have a business. Well, first of all, it's really hard to work in traditional workplaces when you're neurodivergent and
Yeah.
not just burn out. There, some organizations are definitely better than others, and they're trying to come up with ways to be more flexible and kind of adapt to different people, which is really important because the organizations are going to miss out on tons of creativity and amazing people if they don't. But in the entrepreneur world, a large amount of people that I meet are neurodivergent. The traditional workplace didn't work for them,
Hmm.
and so they're designing a career that fits them better and where they get to pursue their passion and interest. And there's challenges that come with that, having the differences with executive function and densities, to be able to get the stuff done that isn't as fun and interesting can be a challenge. And so yeah, I help them, and really I use my background from being in education, where I help people put together workshops to be able to share their knowledge and use it as part of their business. So
Oh wow, that's awesome. And so, is do the clients that you see and that you end up assisting and helping? I imagine obviously they're able to come out of it working with you, and they're just like, hey, this has been a great experience, and whatever the case might be. But have you seen like a dramatic shift in from when they started to when they say they complete ending work, or they complete your working?
yeah, so they come in thinking that I'm just here to help them with their business in a way that sort of aligns with how they're wired. And they leave with a completely different mindset about themselves. And I used to think that I wasn't enough. I was hustling to prove my worth and
Mm,
pricing things so low because I didn't feel like I was valuable. All of the traumas that are associated with being neurodivergent and not really fitting into the school system or the workplace, and specifically with ADHD, there's research that they're told hundreds of thousands more negative comments than people
yeah.
without growing up. And so just that self-confidence, seeing their differences as strengths and being okay with their things that are more challenging for them. Like it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to have needs and get supports with some of the things, and look at all of these awesome things about me. Like that's the biggest shift that's most rewarding, that they don't necessarily come to me looking for, but happens as part of the work that I do.
That's awesome. I think it's great, right? Because being an entrepreneur is, I know a lot of people say it, especially nowadays, right? A lot of people like the title of the entrepreneur title, right? And then there are some people who you could just see they have that natural gift of creating something. But no, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that. I don't know if I maybe but they're able to walk you through a business plan, something that just came off the top of their head, and walk you through an entire business plan and start from start to finish what the marketing side is going to look like, how they're going to get the product out, how the product's going to start from the first 3 year goal plan and strategy. And it's just like, hey, I don't know if you realize that, but a lot of people went to school for that. You just said that off the top of your head. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's people who went to school to learn all of these things, and you just like, but I'm not an entrepreneur, man. I just a type of person who just likes to work from somebody. I'm like, no, you have a gift. You got to use it. Oh my goodness, use it. You are so powerful. And it's crazy because like I said, I might be beating a dead horse here, but people there are so many gifted people, and it's almost like they've told themselves a lie for so long that they started to believe the lie that they're not good enough.
Yep.
And that for like prime example, I was one of those people. I would tell myself for the longest time I wasn't good enough. And so uh, kind of going back, I was like I said, I joined the army because I thought it was stupid. Fast forward to now, I have a bachelor's degree. I'm finishing my second bachelor's degree in December. Start my master's degree in January. Now, degrees in school, those things are not to those. I don't say those things to equate to success, if you will, but I say those things because the whole reason I didn't go to college was because I didn't believe in myself. But now I'm at a place where I have reached the portion where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go for a master's, and I definitely will pursue a doctorate in something, for personal goal of mine as well. So for those out there, I'm telling you, you are good enough, you are capable. You just have, find someone such as Megan here who can help you get there. I promise you. There are so many people out there who think they're not good enough. You are. I promise. Trust me. Trust me, you are. And so for you with yourself, when you started that business, was it a man, I really hope this works, or was it you're just like I'm going to go for it. I'm really excited for it, and I'm putting my best foot forward. Right? It sounds like it was a best foot forward thing, but I know for a lot of us who've ever started a business, there's a lot of hesitation amongst the I'm going to put my best.
Yeah, I mean, I went through a lot of ups and downs through it of like, woohoo, this is so exciting. And then like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm failing
Yeah,
miserably. I had no idea how much I still had to learn. I was all like confident and then just like crash.
yeah,
This is not going how I planned. Why can't everybody just see how awesome I am without me doing a bunch of work marketing? And
yeah.
so yeah, it's definitely been one of the most challenging things I've done,
Mhm.
but it's really building my resilience. And I love that I'm being a role model for my kids, that if
Yes.
they want to choose to do something different and pursue their passion and have their own business, that it's possible for them. And just because they think differently, that's actually a strength. And that also, like, I've needed a lot of help and I'm really bad at asking for help. I
Mhm.
love to like do everything on my own. I'm independent. I don't
Yeah.
need you. And to be over the last few years, like needing a lot of coaching myself and support from mentors and just different people that I've connected with. It's been a good growth opportunity for me, and now I
Yeah.
get to do that for other people in the same position. So
That's awesome. And so, you were working in the begin with. Did you imagine or did you picture yourself to be where you are today? Say 10.
no, definitely not. Like
No. Okay.
I even a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
like 3 years ago, because what gave me belief in myself was that I worked for an entrepreneur as a special education consultant for a little while.
Mhm.
That was my first job when I left the leadership roles that I was doing for the district, and I was her first hire. And I watched her do it and I was like, oh my gosh, like this could be possible for me too. And so she taught me so much as I got to work with an entrepreneur who is in a startup phase. And then I decided that that was the path that I wanted to take for myself. So she
Awesome. And so
inspired me.
that's awesome. I think it's great because we sometimes that seeing someone else do it gives us that extra push that we did to start it ourselves, and or whatever the case might be. I know for me, I started a business. I actually started a trucking business. It was like 3 or 4 years ago, and it failed. Right, like so, like I'm laughing, and some people might say, like, "Holy crap, he's acknowledging." Yeah, no, it failed. It
Mhm.
failed, and I was excited. I was nervous in the beginning, right? Like I'm talking like almost like anxiety, like nervousness to press,
Mhm.
like it was almost like you were pressing start on a video. But like to get my EIN and do the get all those things, I was like on my computer, almost like shaking, like if I do this, this means it's real. This means I'm doing it.
Mhm.
I'm doing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I. And I did it. And I'm just like, okay, I got this. This is even though nothing's happened. Nothing's happened yet. I just pressed the button. I purchased. I purchased my EI or my package, if you will, to start my trucking business, and it was a nerve wracking thing. But anyway, that business failed, and when it did, I was able to come out of it and say, there's like a list of 10 things. I said, you know what? If I'm going to do it again, this is where I need to improve on. Prior to me saying I'm going to start a business, but
Mhm.
it was a joyful experience. I enjoyed it because I learned so many things, right? About, like I
Yep.
said, about marketing, about strategy, about hiring contractors versus like on 1059 versus actually hiring employees, and all these things, and working with people outside of the military, because in the military it's one of those things. If you're a leadership position, you kind of you say jump and they say how high, almost, basically, right?
Right.
Now, working with people outside of the military who are not necessarily beholden to a contract with the United States, they're just with a contract with me. It was kind of like, okay, hey, this is what I need you to do, and realizing like I can't do the same things that I do in the military. I have to find a
Mhm.
different way to go about it. And I did, and I was successful in building those relationships, but I wasn't successful in motivating or inspiring them to want to go out there and put themselves out there, and because I was in that startup phase. So it was
Mhm.
quite an experience. I did
It's
fail,
hard.
but it was a learning experience that
Yep.
I would never take back. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Even though
Exactly.
there was money that have been wasted that I would never get back, it still was a learning experience. And so, is your business now is your first one, and it sounds like it's been successful. Are you enjoying that entrepreneurship phase, or not phase, but that entrepreneurship life? And some days are longer than others, or whatever the case might be.
Mhm.
But are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I feel like I'm getting to design my work life in alignment with exactly how I'm wired, and I am learning so much about like taking breaks and taking care of myself. And when I was in education, like it was, I'm a martyr. I'm going to just
Yeah.
give everything I have to the
Yeah.
kids. I just I'm an empath. I have deep, deep compassion, and I love the kids. But it was at the expense of my health and being able to have any energy left for my family and my own kids. And so now that I have done this reset and I'm doing entrepreneurship, I'm figuring out how to just have that life where I am energized. I have something left for my family, and I'm doing what I love. And so it doesn't have to take all 80 hours a week or anything. Like I'm actually pretty fast and efficient when I'm doing exactly what I'm really interested in. So
That's awesome. And so, final question for you. So you're doing all these, you're doing this thing, your business, you're operating, you're running it, and all these things. You got a husband, you have two kids that are growing up and they're neurodivergent themselves, right? So with all that you're doing, would you say, have you gotten the support from your family? Because the support from your family it's essential. It's an essential thing when you're doing something, because sometimes I know I miss small moments with my kids, right, with by doing this. And so
mhm.
I miss some of those moments, some of those moments that I don't want to miss, but I'm missing them. But I have to, I also tell myself, like, because I'm doing something that, 5+ years now, when it's at its peak, if you will, I'm able to show them something like, hey, this is why I was missing those things. But I promise you, it wasn't because I didn't want to be there, but this is why I was missing those things. And look at what it came from. Look at what we're able to do. We're able to go travel and go do all these cool things that we weren't able to do before, or whatever the case might be. So for you and your family, I imagine you have your husband's support, your obviously kids support. What is that like? What's that feeling of just knowing that even though you have a lot of these things going on in your life, but you still have their support, and sometimes you miss it, but you come down the stairs, if you will, if you have stairs in your house, and they just from working long hours, and they're just like, Mom, it's so exciting, even though you're right up the stairs. What's that feeling like?
I mean, it's amazing to get support when you're putting yourself out there and for them to be so proud of me. I just did a TEDx talk last October, and
That's
that was
awesome.
like a year-long like process for me to apply and practice and give that. And I love being that role model that I'm doing what lights me up and what I'm excited about, and I want them to do the same. And it hasn't always been easy. I mean, sometimes my husband has felt scared that I'm going and doing something. I had this nice steady income, and I had worked my way up the ladder and had all this leadership roles and responsibilities, and I got a degree to be a principal. I went
Oh wow.
past my master's and was quote unquote successful in my educational field, to just leave all that and take this big risk. Like it it hasn't always been like, yay, this is great. Sometimes it's been hard, and we've had to work through that. And yet, like, I still do feel supported and loved, and that they're proud of me, and that I'm doing what's right for me. And so even the challenges have really brought us closer together as we work through them.
That's awesome. I will say one of the proudest moments I've had is my daughter. You know, we had on the TV, their YouTube was up, and it was my wife's YouTube page, if you will, and it comes up is a picture of me, and she's like, "Dad's on the TV," and she's like, "Dad, are you on everybody's TV?" I was like, "Well, maybe one day." She's like, mind blown by this. She goes, and so
Uh-huh.
like to hear her out in public, she's like, "My dad's on TV," and I'm like, "Well, okay, hold on,
A
let's be careful."
famous
Yeah, like
TV
she's
star.
like, yeah, she's like, "Dad's on TV. I see him. You pull up YouTube, there's my dad. I can tell you, I can point him out. I can find him. He's there. I know he's there. I've seen him. I've watched his videos on, when I started, she would watch my videos as she was cleaning whatever, and the girls were running around and they would listen and watch whatever and laugh. But she was like, "My dad's on TV," and that is the feeling, one of the best feelings I got, to tell me that, like, you know what, I'm happy and I'm content. I'll keep going, and it's totally worth it, to get that recognition and that admiration from her, of just being like, her dad's on TV, and that
Hmm.
I know what it means. I'm not that famous, but I'm not even famous, but like for my daughter to be able to recognize and see me, if it was is a good feeling to get that feedback from them. So that is all the questions I have. Before we go, before we sign off, is there anything? Where can people find you? What's the best place people want to find you? They want to get a hold. Where can they?
Teachtochange.com.
Awesome. Okay. And you got social media anywhere? So like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but do you have any of those? Where they
Uh,
can find you on there?
my main one that I do is LinkedIn.
Okay. LinkedIn, guys. So everything, all of her stuff will be in the description below. I'll make sure it's included so you can find her. Her website will be there as well. If you are someone who is an entrepreneur, who is neurodivergent, who wants that extra assistance, Megan is your person. She is the person to come to look out, to reach out to, and get that further assistance to help you in your entrepreneurship journey grow and develop. So her stuff will be in the description. That's all we have. Thanks for joining us, Megan. I really appreciate you coming on. Guys, that's another episode of Mediocre Dads. Being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre.
Thank you.